What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catapaglia sitting on the couch, making some money, investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. If you've been watching the 52-week challenge videos, you know that I've been buying up 7014 Raymond Ave almost every week for quite a while now. It's one that I hold of more tokens than just about anything other than Odom. I think I have I've got 185. We're gonna do some math today, so you can tell from this spreadsheet that we're gonna get into that. I want to explain why I've been buying this a little bit more detail. It is one, so I decided I wanted to, a couple weeks back I had talked about um, trying to experiment with the liquidity pools a little bit more, and so this is one that I already had some token stake, and so I've been staking USDC with it as well. What I basically want to do is take one of them that I was already holding, or that I was already buying up just because of the pure discount, and try to figure out like, is it one that if we get it working well again, um, I want to see how what that total outcome can look like based on like returns both in the liquidity pool and in the tokens that I'm holding. Um, I figured I haven't really been using Lofty the way it's been intended, right? Like almost all of the profits I'm making on here are from short-term trades and arbitrage opportunities, but they're really, I really haven't had any. I guess I have a few where I'm just holding for the, for the cash flow, but it's very few, and I just don't. It doesn't seem like it's really. I've mentioned many times that my long-term money I think is going to go into Mogul instead of Lofty in the future because the average deals are so much better. But one of the things that I started really thinking about is, because of the discounted nature of a lot of these legacy properties, if we can actually turn some of these around into ones that I've made a bigger investment in, what does that look like, and um, could it actually work? Now, I'm not super enthusiastic about it. Like, I think the math I've done so far makes me think maybe it will work, but I feel like I just have to give it a full try. And so I picked this one because I already had been accumulating for a while, and I started buying them a little bit more aggressively. But now that I've got a decent amount, I figured I'd start talking a little bit more about this, um, and share some of the math that I'm doing, and why I think this particular property makes a lot of sense for this. So what is this? It's just a single family home. It's long-term rental, 2 bedroom, 1 bath. It is. Let me show you the pictures of it. Um, it looks very similar to this right now. We have recent listing photos where they listed it for rent only 4 months ago. We might end up having to evict this tenant. It seems like when we transitioned over to property managers, we may have lost contact with the tenant, and maybe they're just taking advantage of that, and maybe not. I don't know. But it's a very small property, although it does have this full basement, which is uh, somewhat of a benefit. And I'm going to mention one of the ways that I think is helpful. So why do I like that it's a small property? One of the things that kills us a lot on Lofty is our turnover expense and our repairs and maintenance. And so, um, this is renting for $1,095 when you're renting you know, 1,000 or 1,500 square foot home for $1,100 a month versus when you're renting a 600 square foot home for $1,100 a month. Your maintenance costs relative to your rent is much different, right? And so I like that with a smaller property, your turnovers are going to typically be cheaper, and it's smaller, but still getting a decent rent. So that's one of the reasons I picked this one. I think being a smaller property, it's to a certain extent our expenses will be lower as far as turnover, as far as repairs and maintenance, long-term capital. I mean, the roof on this is tiny, right? Like this is a very small job when we have to replace the roof. So that's one of the, I actually really enjoy smaller homes when there is a market to rent them. And this one rented pretty quickly, although maybe we're having a problem with the tenant, but it rented fairly quickly once it was rent ready. And honestly, it wasn't beautiful in the listing picture. So, how rent ready it really was, I'm not sure. This is also a market where I have a couple connections, not tons of them, but people that I trust their opinion on the value, and they think selling this for $100,000 is pretty reasonable. So if we have to sell it, that's why I was buying this one up to begin with. Um, the estimated value on Realtors 103, on Redfin it's 112. But the people I talk to in the market, one of which is a developer and investor, and so I really trust his judgment. Thought that 100,000 was a pretty reasonable assumption for a sale, and that was a while back, and that's why I started accumulating tokens. That and the other research that I had done. But I think talking to professionals in the market that actually know the neighborhood and the property is super helpful, because a lot of times, the websites they're just pulling data, and sometimes they're just kind of dumb. They miss certain things about a property. The layout of this one isn't bad at all. This site thinks it's a one bedroom, one bath, and I don't even know why they think that, but it is clearly a two bedroom, one bath. Um, so, it's got that going for it. I think so. One of the first thing I want to show you is, so when I was looking at a sale, all right, real world sale, sale price 100,000. Currently, there are 2,176 tokens outstanding. I used a 9% closing costs. We have debt on this property, right? There's outstanding debt to the Universal Lending DAO, but then also unpaid bills, and these I think are almost all due to the past property manager. And then there is a AC repair that's needed, and this was one of the cheaper quotes. And this is a full replacement of the condenser, and I think even maybe an upgrade of the interior. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at the whole thing. But so assuming we did that prior to the sale, and then even assuming we put another $5,000 into the property, net proceeds would be almost $67,000, and which is about $30 per token. So currently, my basis, including all fees, are $20.13. This 23 bucks I have up here is actually just um, the the current token price plus fees. So if you're buying at the current prices, you'd be about there. But so net proceeds would be about 30 bucks per token. So based on that, if I just from what I've bought, if we sold out, it's a 53% ROI, not an annualized number. It still looks pretty good. Oop, not at $90, but at $90,000, right? So still 32%, and even at $80,000. And again, this is with a brand new AC and $5,000 in additional repairs on a small home, right? So getting it pretty much retail ready, I'm still making a decent return, right? A decent ROI. So this is why I've been buying it up in general. I think that there's a lot of room for a real world sale to make it work. But I wanted to look at also like, okay, so what are the reason that I decided, okay, this will be one that I really try to experiment a little bit more with. Um, you know, Instead of trying to push for a sale for this one, I haven't yet. To see like, okay, let me stake some USDC in the liquidity pool, and let's see like, okay, what if we actually? So this is one that I had proposed the change to property manager a little while back. Now Waylick took it over. Uh, I don't know. I feel like there's the potential for. I'd already been thinking about doing a cash out refi on this property, but it's something he's been talking about on a whole bunch of properties. So I wanted to look at, okay, what if we actually did that and we kept this as a long-term rental? Um, Saying, pretty conservative LTV, $55,000, which is 55% LTV if that 100,000 is real. 30-year term, and I'm just estimating a real high interest rate. I think on a 55% LTV and using a debt service coverage ratio loan, I think we get below this 8%, but I really don't know. Uh, you know, these one of the things that dealing with all these has been difficult for me is the numbers are just so much smaller than what we use here in San Antonio. Like there's no such thing as $100,000 home here that you'd want to own as a investment property. Oh, and so one of the things, why would I even consider holding this? Because I've talked a lot about this. Isn't a market that I really like, but the neighborhood. This is actually one of the better zip codes in this market. So St. Louis, it is a shrinking market. It's not great, but this is within University City. Um, it is, so it's one of the better rated neighborhoods. And talking to a few people that are local there, they sort of confirm it. Yeah, it's not a fantastic neighborhood, but it is, depending on how you judge it. But Niche thinks it's a A plus. But where they're giving that the whole zip code, so we're kind of not in the best part of that zip code. When you look at the crime map, they actually had to go pretty far back to fill up the whole map. So even though this looks like a whole bunch, even if you go, almost 3 months back, you don't have anything right at the property. And I thought this was really good, especially because this is a park right by the property, and to not have reported crimes in that park is a pretty good sign. I didn't actually click on this and see if this was a real shooting or not. Shooting, stabbing, PD. Yeah, so it looks like it really was. Graze, wound to the head. So obviously, not like I said. I mean, not a great market, but if we're gonna, most of the legacy properties are in not great markets, and if it, so I tried to pick one that I thought had some real potential, and this is one that. So that's how I came up with this. Um, yeah, when they give their, this is the niche overall grade. Obviously public schools isn't a great score, but everything else is pretty good except for housing. But I mean, obviously, this is the house we're talking about. So are you surprised? I mean, that's no, right? And we're way below the median home value in that zip code, and we're a little bit below the median rent. So both of those things I think are pretty good. It's a very strong rent to own ratio for the air, for the type of market we're in. I mean, if you look at this in a lot of places, you have a lot more renters. Um, so I don't know. That was, from just a real estate fundamentals aspect, there was reasons I liked it. This is that park that I just mentioned. I mean, it's that close, and so to have like this nice sized park that had no crime in the last 3 months, or at least none reported, um, it's a nice amenity, right? So it makes me think that there's some potential. So let's look at this as a cash out refi though, and holding as a long term rental. Um, so yeah, $55,000, which is 55% LTV. I'm trying to be really conservative whenever I do these numbers because it is, like I said, the numbers don't really, like, I don't know what a $55,000 cash out refi costs. I think 3,500 for closing costs is very conservative. I honestly don't know, because again, it's just a very small number relative to like properties here where I am. You might have a similar property to that. Well, we don't have something like this in a part of town where I'd want to invest. But if you had, some of the cheaper investment properties are around 200,000. If you were doing 55%, your loan's 110,000. I mean, it's twice as big. And so, um, obviously we'd have to dial some of this in, but whenever I'm trying to always err on the side of caution when I'm doing my numbers on this stuff. And so I'm saying, okay, so we got the 55,000. We paid closing costs, pay off the debt that's owed, the universal lending DAO that's owed to the other manager, and paying for the new AC. We fund a $10,000 operating reserve, um, which I think makes a lot more sense. These $5,000 reserves I don't like at all. Like $5,000 for a $100,000 home. I don't know, 5%, I get it, but it's because the price is so cheap. It's just way too easy. Like we couldn't even replace the AC for the whole operating reserve, right? So fund a $10,000 operating reserve, and then now because we have debt, and it's debt that the DAO is going to pay, and so that's what I'm proposing here. If we're thinking about that, I'd want to have an interest reserve, and so this is actually an interest, a payment reserve. So this covers 6 months of principal and interest payments. Um, and so you could do that and then still have about $20,000 left over that you're distributing to the current token holders. So, okay, I'm in for 20 and I get $9 back as soon as we do this refi, right? So you could cash out a decent amount. This is just one option, right? We could do it without cashing out any and taking a much smaller loan. Um, Sometimes it's really hard to get lenders to give you like a $30,000 loan. So I don't know if that even works, right? I think 55,000. I think this deal probably exists, but it probably will take some work to find. So, um, and just to be completely clear, I didn't go and talk to lenders and figure out does this deal exist yet or not. Because of I think that it does based on just some of my general experience, but it is always, every market is a little bit different. I've worked in some markets where you're never going to get a loan under $100,000, but it's because we have much higher average prices. I think they couldn't do that here because you have so many cheap homes. You have to this has to be a product that's available. Now, whether it's available in the Dow or not, I don't know. One of the thoughts that I have had when I'm, pick this one is like, okay, if this is a property that I get, pretty big invested in, and, pretty heavily invested in, and we can't make this work within the Dow. Could I just buy it from the Dow and what would it look like then? And so that's part of my thoughts when I was, doing mortgage stuff initially too. Or what if I just make a loan? Because, I have invested in mortgages quite a bit. I don't like the 8% aspect, but if I own enough of it that it's benefiting me on the other end, maybe something like that. Um, but these are the numbers I'm just trying to play with a little bit and see. So assuming we can get that type of loan, okay, you've got a big distribution. So now you're just holding, so it's really basically dropping your basis down to almost cutting it in half, right? And then I'm just doing some really, again, guerrilla math on this, right? We've got our gross potential rent, 1,095. That's what it's been rented for. Vacancy collection loss. I'm being really, really conservative, putting a 10% in there, which I think is in this market, I think that's necessary, right? Like a lot of markets, you might say, oh, 5 or 6%. I just don't think it's realistic, right? I think having that longer vacancy collection loss is important. Now, I think we'll cut down on it once we have money that we can keep the property maintained. We're not, slowing down every time we need to fix something. That's not aggravating tenants and making them move out. It's also not getting in the way of turning it over quickly once it does go vacant. So I think that we alleviate some of that by having, the money in the Dow. But again, so we've got our net rent, 10% management fee. I didn't even look at this when I was putting these in. We might have a little bit higher one today, but I think that that's really reasonable to expect. Property taxes, I just use the actual taxes that are being paid. Same thing with insurance, including the Dow LLC fee that we pay on every single one of these. That seems to be not factored into a lot of people's numbers when they're doing their guerrilla math. Repairs and maintenance, I'm doing 10%. And now remember, we have this big repairs and maintenance reserve. So what I would actually be proposing here is all repairs just come out of our repair and maintenance reserve, and every month we're contributing 10% of our NOI into that reserve, right? And uh, maybe just forever, right? Like maybe just let it keep growing. Um, because we are at some point going to have to replace the roof. You're going to have, you know, the ACs being replaced with maybe the furnace, hot water heaters, like all these things. I think we just operate these on too much of a shoestring budget typically. But so, okay, we're accounting for, like you can see, like 10% vacancy collection loss, 10% management fee, 10% repairs and maintenance. I'm really try to be conservative here. And so that gives us an NOI of 525 bucks a month. With the loan that I had showed you above, with the terms we were assuming, that's 404. And so we're getting, we're covering debt service coverage ratio of 1.3. If this isn't a number that you're used to looking at, it is something that I look at on a lot of these properties, and I probably don't talk about it enough. But like when a lender is underwriting a loan, it used to always be 1.2 or 1.25 was the minimum. In times of like boom time, sometimes you even see lenders go down to 1.1, but 1.3 is a pretty healthy debt service coverage ratio, especially when you have when we have a interest or the principal and interest reserve that we have, and that we're doing a lot of conservative underwriting here, right? And so with all of that, the cash on cash return, and when I'm calculating that, I am pulling out the amount of money that we got back right away, right? So just looking at the basis that we have left in there, it's not a huge cash on cash return, right? Less than 5%. Um, I looked at this a couple different ways. You can do it, if we did just do 35,000, which is basically with no distribution. I mean, it ends up being some because it's not exact. But then you got 6.5. Again, though, this is with us having some conservative numbers here. In a typical month, it's going to look better than that because you're going to add back. It's not going to be vacant. So, you can't compare this to the yields that you see on Lofty in the perfect months, right? This is like the average, taking into account all those things. It's a pretty decent, it's not as good as the mogul ones, which reminds me, please like and subscribe. In the description to this video, I have links to all the sites that I'm currently invested on. Talking about Mogul is what triggered that thought. Just because I'm invested on those platforms doesn't mean that you should. You want to do your own due diligence on those platforms and on the properties on the platforms. There's also a link to the Discord that I have set up. There's over 100 of us in there, quite a few people on a regular basis talking about fractional real estate investing on a bunch of different platforms. It's not a sales funnel, it doesn't cost anything. You can just jump in there and join the conversation. Um, and yeah, tickle the like button, hit the bell, do all the stuff. So yeah, it's not a great cash on cash return when you think of it compared to, some of the great yields that we see on Mogul. But what do we have here? Well, we're getting, if this is leverage within the Dow, we're getting a levered return, right? And so, our basis, and this is all assuming, you're in, this is, I was looking at it, the math I'm doing is at this $23 price. I don't think I made that clear when I was saying like the cash on cash return. The 23 all in, so that's like the somewhere around $21 plus all the fees. Your 23 bucks all in. That's what this cash on cash looks like, and it's after accounting for with the higher loan if we paid stuff out, if or if we didn't. And so basically you have a $13 basis in this scenario, right? But then you're getting principal pay down. You're getting the if we do get any property level appreciation, um, sometime in the future, we're going to get to look at this sales scenario. Now, of course, we'd have debt to take care of, but in a situation where the property actually appreciates, you're getting full access to that appreciation versus like all the other properties on Lofty, or virtually all of them, you're not getting levered appreciation because the more, whoever's paying the mortgage down gets, dilutes you over time, right? And so, I think even though it's not beautiful, I think it is a acceptable exit strategy, right? And so like, especially because I'm being very conservative. So yeah, obviously, for me, especially because of my low basis, this real world sale looks amazing, right? Getting 53% ROI right away. But even if not, if this is something that I had to hold for levered cash flow, because of how much I think this is conservative with the big operating reserve, the big interest in principal reserve, we've already paid off the debts with, put a brand new AC in. Like I think this becomes a pretty durable cash on cash return. And so even though it's lower than what I'd like it to be, I think I'd still be pretty happy with this. And then, in addition to that, I think there's a third exit strategy that could work for this property. That might be. I think I mentioned this once before, but it's pretty surprising. There are a lot, and this is University City, right? We're close to. I don't know what it is. If it's, I don't remember the name of the university. If it's just the University of Missouri or what it is. I should know. I can't think of what it is at the moment though. But so it is close to the university. And so there are a lot of these like little two bedroom, one baths that are doing well as a short term rental. And so one of the things that we could do is if we did that refi, instead of distributing cash, you could take that $20,000, make the property look a little bit nicer, furnish it. Probably, you still don't need to there's probably room to still distribute a little something, but really, I'd probably just want a bigger reserve as well, because short-term rentals fluctuate more. And that's one of the things that we could do too, is because we have a reserve, we could smooth the cash on cash a lot more, right? Like if there's repairs, we just pull it out of the reserve. If and then we're just refilling it on a regular basis, right? And so I think having that smoother, more consistent cash on cash return would make it a much more attractive deal for a lot of people. But yeah, and so even if we did it as a short term rental, you could still use, you could use a basically a revenue reserve, right, where you're smoothing your revenue. In your bigger months, we're not distributing much, and in your other months, you're distributing more. I don't really love doing that, but it's something I've seen people do. If the investors really just want to have like a more stable revenue. I don't know. I shouldn't even mention it because I really don't like the idea, but it is something that I've seen some syndicators do, right, when they're doing it, so to give you the more feeling of that secure return. But it's really like, why not just give me my money when it's available, right? But so with this property, it looks, projected revenue 26,600 annual. I looked at a lot of the different comps, and I think it's pretty reasonable. I think that that's an achievable number um, as a two bedroom, one bath in this market. If and spending, is the $20,000 really enough dollars to get it there? Probably, because it's like, again, it's a very small property. Oh, I mentioned earlier, like, it is a very small property, but one of the things, I think that you can set up, this is where that basement, that I mentioned earlier comes into play. Some of the competitors set up like a little game room in the basement, right? Ping pong table. They didn't really have a beautiful finished basement. They, maybe paint the floor. Um, obviously this is already has this bar in here, but you could do something like that, have a little bit more of an amenity than you might have, otherwise. So now, obviously, you have operating expenses and whatnot, and so they're saying, AirDNA predicts net operating income of 15,000 in this scenario. I don't always trust them, right? But I mean, that's significantly higher than our net operating income here, right? And you'd have the same loan. You wouldn't have had the distribution though. So I don't know. I didn't take the time to do the math on that, but I just think it's very interesting that this is another potential exit strategy. It's one that I didn't immediately think of when I looked at this home, right? Like, I mean, that's one of the things I think that for a lot of the legacy properties, if we take a harder look, there might be other options like this, right? And, okay, is it worthwhile to do the work to get that furniture set up and do those things, right? Like, are we going to pay someone to do that? I'm not in this market, and even if I were, I'm not doing that, right? So maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense for that. Maybe one of the things we could do is lease it to an Airbnb operator, right? And that'd be something, it'd be pretty easy to find. Look at all the other Airbnb listings, find those people, reach out to them, maybe get a longer term, more stable lease, because and a lot of times those operators want to get a 5-year lease or something, right? Because they don't want to, and so then we're not taking, we're not getting additional income, but maybe we're going to have a little bit more stable tenant, but because it's somebody who they're making money on the arbitrage, because that's what they call that, right? STR arbitrage, where they rent and then they use it as a STR. But so I think that that's a possibility. So that's, I really just want to talk about why I'm doing this, right? Because I know I just keep showing that I'm buying this one. I've accumulated a decent sized stake in it now, but it's because one, I think it still makes a ton of sense as a sale, right? So a real world sale, if it ends up vacant, if we end up evicting this tenant and it's vacant again, maybe that's going to make the most sense. But even if not, I think it can work as a long-term rental. We have to do something about the debt, right? Like, we have to do a refi or something. I mean, obviously it would work if we didn't, if we just, like the universal lending DAO, that debt just doesn't really work, right? Like, it's a high percent interest. And then you're just paying too much of your cash flow every month. Like, having some debt that looks more like actual real estate debt, I think would make a lot of sense and make this turn into a deal that makes, that's a lot more attractive. And then again, having the third exit strategy of the potential for a short-term rental, all those things together, I think makes this kind of interesting. And why it's one that I decided, okay, this is the one I'm gonna try to accumulate a larger stake. I'm gonna, experiment a little bit more with staking in with the liquidity, with the US, both sides of the pool, right? I have stuff staked on both sides, and just see, like, okay, if we can get this operating well again, I think I'll end up doing really well with those staking activities, right? Like, if this, if it's working well and it seems like, hey, that's actually a $30 token. It's not, I think at $22 or 21.50, and the 23 with all the fees and everything, to me, this just strikes me as very undervalued still. Again, you want to do your own due diligence. There's certainly more things that I could be missing, right? I mean, this is, it's still a relatively surface level look at this. We'd have to have some boots on the ground, figure out what does it really look like, right? Are my estimates, do we really need more than $5,000 in other repairs, right? Or is it, I mean, I think this is a pretty conservative look, and especially like when I went all the way down to 80,000, um, then I think that we really are. And okay, this is a loss based on the current price, but it's still really good. It's still not really good, but it's still an acceptable profit for me, right? But even 90, or if you do the 80, but you have less in repairs, or you sold it as is and you didn't replace the AC, like there's just a lot of conservatism, built into this model, and I still like the output, right? And so that's what it's tough to find this in a lot of the legacy properties. I actually really don't understand why this one. I think people look at, oh well, it does have a lot of debt, which it does. So we have to come up with a way to fix that. But anyway, that's how I'm thinking about this one. That's why you see me talk about it every single week. Like it's one that I've added tokens in. Um, there's really nothing special about the property itself. I mean, I do like that it's very small. I do like that it's one of the better neighborhoods in the market. It seems like, or I was able to corroborate the sales estimates with people in the market that seem to know what they're talking about. So, it is, I did a little bit of work to decide on which one to do this with. Um, but it is, one of the things I kind of go back and forth with is it still just seems like the real opportunity here is to just sell it, right? I mean, there's just such a big ROI to do that immediately versus like it's still not a great investment property long term, right? It's not a great cash on cash, although we do get the benefit of the levered appreciation in there. And it's not just so when I say that, it's not just like if you think about, okay, if the property's worth 100,000 and we take out a $55,000 loan, and then we currently also, let's see, you have your current token prices. So let's see, I should have done this before. Our current token price, 23 bucks times outstanding tokens. Okay, so actually, that's interesting to look at. Um, you're not really, you are getting the levered appreciation, but if you look at the current token price, it's really not. You're really above the total value if you look at equity plus debt. But this assumes, I mean, this is we'd end up having, 12,421 bucks in. Oh yeah, it doesn't. No, no, that's true. So it's levered because we're getting that, but then minus the 20. So let's see. We need to do this minus. See, this is what I told you we'd have some math today, right? Minus this number here because we got that back right away, right? Okay, cool. So our total locked up in the property still would be like 85,000, but so we already have some built-in equity over and above, um, and so we're getting levered appreciation on top of, but we already have like 50% extra. So if you have 15,000 and our equity in this is 30, we already have a 50% gain on the equity in there. And so as that grows, this could actually, yeah, it's one that I really should build a deeper model in. One of the things that I've done this a little bit on some of these, but one of the things that happens on Lofty is you get all these weird effects where you're getting appreciation based on the real world value, right? So if it's worth $100,000, you're getting your appreciation based on that $100,000. But if our basis in the property is 30, so okay, let's say it appreciated 3%. Well, that's only $3,000 on $100,000, but that's 10% on our $30,000 in equity we have in the property, right? And so, that's why I'm saying like we'd get like a really juiced, equity, levered appreciation on our equity because of that, right? Because we already have this, you know, distorted value on our equity because of the discount in the token price. Um, Hopefully that just wasn't more confusing than it should be. I should have done that math ahead of time and then just instead of talking about it now. But so that, that's the thing. Like a lot of this stuff goes through my head, but I don't, it's, I always struggle with how much I want to present in these videos, right? Like I'm trying to not do, I'm not using my actual model that I use for stuff because I don't know, it confuses me sometimes. Like I'm trying, I'm trying to break it down like to really simple, like like in a way that I can talk about it in 30 or 40 minutes and have it be pretty straightforward. And so that's why when I do this, um, trying to really be conservative in the way I look at it. But I think that like because of because of the discounted equity, a lot of times the deals with the long-term hold actually look like a better deal if you get any sort of appreciation, right? If the market, if this just stays as $100,000 home for the next 10 years, well then, whatever our discount is today, that's what we're stuck with, right? And that's what I'm just not sure. Like, I just don't know. Are we going to get any long-term appreciation in this market or not? I don't think necessarily looking at what's happened in the past several years is a good indicator of what'll happen in the future because we just are in a real state of flux. A lot of these markets that have had shrinking populations, I've talked about this before. I think they've benefited from the fact that they also have shrinking average household sizes, and so that's counteracted some of the effects that you'd see on the prices of real estate. But at a certain point, that's going to end because average household sizes can only get so small, and then you don't have then the shrinking population actually turns into shrinking demand in your market. Um, so I don't know, like it's just not a market I'm super excited about long term, but it is because it's such because of this, right? Because I know, okay, at the end of the day, if I have to sell out, I should do perfectly fine. And then, okay, let's say we hold it for a little while and then we sell it in a couple years. Even if I get this 53% ROI a few years from now and I've had a little bit of a cash on cash return in between, it still should be a good deal. Um, but yeah, that's why, I know, I don't know, every time, every week when before I really decided I was going to share all this, I felt like this must just look like a silly one, right? Like, why am I buying this? Like, okay, it's a discount, but it's like, this is one, it's not necessarily the biggest discount every week, but it's one that I just had decided early on. Like, I think there's a lot of reasons that it makes sense. But because I wanted to build like a bigger position in it before really, going into all this, because I have noticed sometimes when I talk about properties, other people jump in them too. You shouldn't do it just because I do it, right? You should do your own due diligence. Especially if you have a different idea of what you want to do with the property, please don't invest in this one, right? Pick your own, right? If we're gonna, um, I would, because it does just look so good as a real world sale. If we can actually get that sale price, but it is one that I also think like has the real potential for us to do something, to make it work as a long term property that we got into at a decent discount. And so that's about all I want to say about that today. Um, Maybe if anybody's interested in me building out a short term rental model for this too and seeing what that looks like, let me know in the comments or jump in the Discord and tell me or DM me, however, all the ways that you get in touch with me. Um, I think that there's some real potential for that, but who does that work ends up becoming a problem, right? Like it is, uh, that's really anytime we want to do something interesting with any of these properties, that really becomes the problem. Because okay, right now I own about 8% of this. Even if I got to 15%, it's just not worth my time to do it. And so we have to pay someone to do it. And I know Earl recently did that. He had someone go out to his Hawaii property and set it up. So I mean, maybe we could do it in a more affordable way than I think. But I also think it's much more fun to go to Hawaii and set something up than it is to go to St. Louis, Missouri and set something up. So, I think maybe you get a little bit of a deal because of that. I don't know. I'm not sure. Um, anyway, that's really it. I just wanted to share some more thoughts about this one, why it is you see me just keep picking this up. Um, and yeah, I think that it hasn't performed well at all, right? And it does look like we're going to evict someone again. It really seems like that eviction is because like they were a relatively new tenant, they were paying, and it seems like maybe they just opportunistically took advantage of the fact that the change in management and nobody tried to collect their rent, a month ago, and so now this is the second month, and now they're behind, and how are they going to catch up? So they're just ghosting the manager. Like, seems like maybe that's all that happened. I don't really know. It's possible that it gets back on track. Um, and if it does, then it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how do we deal with the debt, and make this so we have a durable income versus just, this wildly fluctuating and paying 13.5% interest and whatnot. I mean, I think that's just really killing a lot of these. And I think, coming up with a solution to that is necessary, right? And even if it's, okay, we still pay a high percent interest, but at least we're getting an amortizing payment, so we're not giving up 50% of the cash flow all the time. Because I think that's why people end up selling out, right? Because a lot of the people are hoping for some yield and would rather make an amortizing payment than, give up half or all of your cash flow if you're just filling the OR and filling, and paying that back. Anyway, I'm curious what you guys think about this one. Um, if anybody's doing something similar with another property, and I guess that's kind of a no-brainer. I know there are people that have just tried to accumulate in certain properties and then move them along. I don't think that we've seen any cash out refis yet. Waylick has talked about doing that to a number of properties. This is one that he's managing now. I'm hoping he's thinking about doing it with this one. I'm not sure, but we do have the debt to deal with. Um, it's one where you could do it inside the DAO and have it work perfectly fine. Um, Maybe you got to pay him something to do that though, right? So maybe there's some other fee in that, and we have to figure that out. Uh, yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, that's it for me for today. Just really sharing those thoughts, and would like to hear feedback from any of you that have any ideas or thoughts around this. Am I missing some stuff? Because again, this is just not how I've been using Lofty up until now. But I think that this is just one that I picked out as being, one of the better opportunities for trying to make this work. So I'm curious what you think. Anyway, until next time, gonna keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.